not prepared!
Welcome to another Top 5 with Kris 05, guys. We finally have some news about when the new nerfs are coming, and we're gonna hear what they will be on the 20th. And they will be implemented on the 25th, so we have plenty of time to play in this meta still, so might as well do another Top 5 for you. The meta is extremely polarized and you don't need me to tell you about it, but yeah, Rogue is basically the meta factor and you either play with Rogue or hard against it, if you wanna succeed. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do, a like and subscribe would really help. Now, let's check out the decks. The first deck on the list obviously has to be Thief Rogue. Thief Rogue has been dominating ever since people figured out how broken the Gnoll with Maestra combo is. And it's basically plaguing ladder, and everybody's complaining at least 50% of their games are against Rogue. And that's not even over-exaggerating. The deck is extremely powerful, and you get to tempo out Wild Pog Gnolls even on turn 1. And even though their discount is kind of a bit iffy and not exactly an exact science, it is very reliable for you to be putting down 0 mana Gnolls very fast. We also have the Double Agent, which is huge amount of tempo for the mana cost, and you can do this as soon as turn 2 if you have the coin. And we obviously also have Shadowcrafter Scabs, which is another insanely busted card. Both Scabs and Gnoll are in huge danger of nerfs, so if you're missing too much of this deck, you're probably not gonna be having a good time crafting it this early to the obvious nerfs to it. We also have Edwin Kingpin, as well as Mistress Might, and those two can really put a lot of work together, especially after Scabs has been played. We have tradable cards in here as well, with which you can draft more cards while you're in the Maestra Masquerade, and that way your Gnolls get down even lower. Don't forget you have Ruster Viper in here, as well as Mistress Might, and both of those are neutral cards, so you will not be discounting your Gnolls if you top deck those. And also, if you're disguised as a mage, for instance, Wand Thief is also not gonna be discounting cards for you. You can check out my detailed guide about this deck and see all of its intricacies and what you can be pulling off with it. But for now, let's move down to the matchups. Currently, your only really bad matchup would be Quest Hand Warlock, and it's not even that bad if you know how to play it, honestly. Against the Quest Hand Warlock, if your early tempo doesn't click, you just go for a big ass Edwin and you try to OTK him like that. But obviously the Warlock is not just gonna be waiting for you, so you gotta be applying pressure till the OTK potential rises. I don't even know what the hell Charge Warrior is, but we're not gonna talk about that. Secret Thief Rogue is also something I haven't really seen. Poison Rogue could be somewhat problematic, but we do have a Viper in here, so all in all you should be kinda fine. And also Big Priest might be a problem with all of its taunts. But yeah, these are all decks you're not gonna be seeing too much on ladder, and that is why this deck is absolutely crushing it in top 1000 Legends. For the Mulligan Guide, you're always gonna want your Wild Pog Gnolls and your Cutlass. Extortion also makes sense of a keep, so you can keep on pulling cards while you're in the Maestra Masquerade, and even Swashbuckler actually makes enough sense, but you do not want to be playing this guy on turn 1. You just keep it for a little bit extra tempo on the turn where you want to be dropping your Wild Pog Gnoll, and that way you also guarantee you're gonna be having a different card for the Double Agent later on if you choose to go for that route. Ruster Viper is also not a bad keep, because you get the tradable it and you're also not top decking it for your Gnoll. And Secret Passage is also not a bad card to keep, but don't get baited into playing it on turn 1. It's rarely worth it to do that. Even I got baited for it a few times, and yeah, sometimes I did giga win, but a lot of the times it flopped hard. Also, Scabs could be a keep in some cases, so keep that in mind. All in all, it's not too cheap of a deck, and Maestra is a very niche card that is probably gonna be useless if the nerfs really hit hard. So if you don't have that, you're probably best off without this deck at this point. Moving down to the next deck, which I haven't really done before, but yeah, it's gonna be another Rogue deck, the Hybrid Poison Rogue. This is basically the other half of the equation right now in the meta, and both of these decks are basically the majority of top legend ladder right now, and even on the lower ranks too. The hybrid part of this deck is literally the 2 Gnolls with Maestra, and that's about it. And the rest of it is just Poison Rogue with some Garrote Reach at the end. We have the Maestra again, which is the only way you're actually discounting your Gnolls, so you're not in a hurry to reveal yourself. And if you manage to get these 2 bad boys early on, you're gonna have a good time on the board early, and you are gonna be able to finish off your opponents with your Shanks, or with your huge reach with Garrotes, Wicked Stabs, as well as your +2 spell power, which is literally OTK potential if you're later on in the game. You have 2 Cloak of Shadows as well as Scabs, and that is basically your defense against everything out there. When playing this deck, you don't really want to be going super all in with the poisons on your Shank, because there's a lot of Vipers out there, so be careful. because that would be considered overextending. In some cases where you don't get your shank, you could even build a big cutlass or god forbid your hero power, but it's still gonna be better than you just flaming that you're not getting your goddamn weapon, whereas you could have been a freaking 6 damage weapon early on and still swing for 12 damage and get some card draw, getting cunning class to 0 and all that goodness you're into. In the end of the day, you do have the shank here for a reason, but if you're not getting it, it's not the end of the world. And nowadays, it's pretty rare for you to actually swing more than 2 times with a weapon anyway before it gets vipered. If you're not getting the shank, just go for a dagger or for a cutlass. Matchup wise, it's very polarized. Decks with a lot of taunts will hurt you, and also hyper aggro like Face Hunter is not gonna be your friend either. Aggro Druid has a lot of taunt potential, and with Quest Druid they just gain too much armor. But all in all, as you can see, everything else is pretty green or 50-50. Even Thief Rogue is positive in this case. So I guess the hybrid aspect really helps. Mulligan wise, you are gonna always want to keep your Wild Pognol, your Cutlass and your Shank. Tradable cards are also pretty good for you, and if you already have your Shank, you can also keep poisons, but don't keep them if you don't have them. Secret Passage, again, I do believe is not a bad keep. The situation is basically the same when going first and when going second. But when going second, you can see that Scabs is actually a lot more keepable because you can get to him a lot faster. The deck is not too expensive, and it only runs Maestra and Scabs as your legendaries, but still, if Maestra and Scabs get nerfed, you might not be too happy about this decision. Moving down to the third deck on my list, which is probably my favorite of the current expansion, the new Beast Druid. The new Beast Druid is an extremely flexible deck, with which you can tempo out a ton of beasts early on, and after that cheat out 0 mana 7 drops like Frostsaber Matriarch and Umber Owl. We are running the new Wildcard Guffin here, with which you can ramp very hard and get a very big Ibis out of it. We obviously have our good Peasants for some early game card draw, Druid of the Reef, we have Adorable Infestation which gives you 2 beasts and 1 discount for Umber Owl, and 2 discounts for Frostsaber because you are summoning beasts out of there. Druid of the Reef is a beast, so that discounts, Nature Studies discounts Umber Owl, Composting discounts, Living Seed discounts twice no matter what you draw, same with Moonlit. Form Growth Sentries is pretty good because you discount Umber Owl as well as your Matriarch, and same goes with Frostwolf Kennels. With Oracle Valoon, you're gonna have an extremely good time doubling up your Frostsabers, your Umber Owls, and even your big Ibis. Like, if you have Oracle Valoon and you play Ibis, he is still gonna be considered a 1 mana minion, and he is gonna get split up. So something like 2 Divine Shield Taunt Rush 11/11s is not a rare sight with this deck. We also have Ghidra and Kazakus in here, which are definitely not essential legendaries for this deck, but if you have them, they're gonna be pretty good. With Ghidra, you could tempo out early with her, and if you manage to stick her on turn 2 for instance, and turn 3 you play Kennels, she becomes extremely powerful. With Kazakus you can scam some wins as well, getting to ping down something with a huge poison, or just use it as another type of arbor up for you. And speaking of which, we also have that obviously. For the matchups, the good news is you're decent against rogues, so that's all that matters right now. Other aggro druids might be a little bit problematic, and priests are not gonna be your friend most of the time as well. Most warlocks are not gonna be too good for you, but honestly, Quest Hand Warlock does not feel that hard to beat. Like, yeah, they have a lot of removal, but you also have a lot of refill, so you should be able to get it down. And against Shaman, you're not gonna be too happy because they can board lock you with tons of freezes, so keep that in mind. Mulligan-wise, when going first, you want your Peasants, your Frostwolf Kennels, Sentries is extremely good, same with Nature Studies, and even Adorable Infestation, just because you're discounting so much your 7 drops. Druid of the Reef is also awesome, and you can even tempo out Oracle Valoon against some classes, as long as you don't think you're playing against Rogue, because that's just gonna get gnolled. Same with Composting. If you think you're gonna be sticking somewhat of a good board like 2 minions on turn 2 or 3, you can go for it. But be careful with it, because it might end up being a dead card for you for quite a while. When going second, it's basically the same. Like, literally the same. The only difference is Frostsaber Matriarch becomes a little bit more keepable, even in your starting hand, especially if you have something like Form Growth Sentries and Adorable Infestation already. All in all, it's not a very cheap deck, but like I said, Kazakus and Ghidra could get cut out of this. And honestly, even people were playing this without Guff and Ibis too, so there's definitely potential for you to build this a lot cheaper than this. Here's what the cheaper version looks like. You get 2 Capture the Flags, 2 Power of the Wilds, and 2 Pathmakers, and that's gonna make it a lot cheaper for you. Literally 4 legendaries cheaper. For Druid right now, we also have Drekthar aggro Druid being pretty good, and in top legend you're gonna be seeing a lot of Ram Druid too, which is doing fairly well against the rogues again. Clown Druid is still existent, and basically the rest is just iterations out of that. On the number 4 spot, again, Quest Hand Warlock. And yes, the reasoning is because it's pretty good against Thief Rogue. Not much to talk about here, other than maybe the flex spots for this deck. You could remove the Mortal Coil if you feel like you want to be including a Viper in this one so you actually have some chance against Poison Rogues, and same goes for the full-blown Evils. You could change them for something like a Cult Neophyte, but the rest is pretty core. Technically speaking, you could even cut down one Soul Rend, but honestly I feel that would be a mistake. Matchup-wise, like I said, you are good against Thief Rogue, but you're absolutely horrendous against Poison Rogue, so if you're seeing too many of those, best not to be going with this one. Mazaki Mage is also going to be destroying you, and Face Hunter is not gonna be too fun for you either. But yeah, everything else is pretty decent. Mulligan wise, when going first you are gonna want your Backfire and Tour Guide. I'm not too sure about Shadowblade, but it does make some sense in certain matchups I guess. Gold Charnel is also gonna be pretty cheap for you pretty fast, and if you have that you might even consider Raise Dead. When on the coin, the legendary becomes a lot more keepable. And Backfire is still pretty good, but be careful because if you play this on turn 3 without playing anything else and tapping on turn 2, you will need to figure out something you wanna be dropping there so you don't actually overdraw. This deck already got nerfed a couple of times, so I'm not sure it's gonna be getting nerfed any more times. And the price is not that high either, so if you want to be playing some Warlock action, this is gonna be your go-to deck. And the last deck on the list is gonna be Face Hunter again, and the reasoning here is because it's very good against Poison Rogue. This is another very standard list, and you've already seen videos about it from me. We still have a couple of Trogs and a Trame Crescent, so you can do some fancy plays, especially with Ramming Mount and your Rhinos. But yeah, everything else is just standard business. Like I said, the matchups, you're not gonna be that great against Thief Rogue, but it's definitely not impossible. But Poison Rogue is gonna be extremely good for you, and that is what the reasoning here is for playing this deck. If you've seen a Fell Demon Hunter, it's probably not gonna be that good for you in that case, but all in all, everything else is fair game. Mulligan wise, when going first, you want your good 1-drop minions, and if you already have some of those, it's gonna be a good idea to keep Doggy Biscuit or Ramming Mount, or both. But the safer play would be to have 2 1-drops and 1 buff instead of the other way around, because removal exists. Trame Crescent honestly is a pretty good keep in most cases, but I definitely feel like this Warsong Wrangler is a little bit too high on the list, so keep that in mind. When going second, it's basically the same. Again, you want to be keeping your cheap minions and your good buffs, and Trame Crescent becomes even better. This is one of the cheaper decks out there with which you can be climbing right now, and if you want to be punishing those Poison Rogues, this is gonna be your go-to deck. For the other classes right now, with Demon Hunter you can go for Fell Demon Hunter or Death Rattle Demon Hunter, and that's basically it for the realistic decks for ladder right now. For Mage, apparently Big Spell Mage is getting some kind of a rise in popularity, but the sample size is way too low to make any statements for now. Mazaki Mage is still gonna be king for Mage. For Paladin, Libram Paladin is at the top, and with a very high margin, but also Buff Paladin is somewhat decent still. For Priest, Aggro Shadow Priest is at the top, but I've literally not seen a single one in top legend, so there's that. Big Priest is also something, and same goes for Quest Priest. With Shamans, we have Quest Shaman at the top, as well as Boner Shaman. Freeze Elemental Shaman is also decent. We also have Burn Shaman, and plenty of other Shamans at the bottom as well, including some Elemental versions. And for Warrior, it's basically only Pirate Warrior or Bust. It's still decent, but obviously Rogues are just dominating right now. So that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Don't forget you can also hire me for some Hearthstone coaching, and check me out on my stream as well. Thanks for watching. I'm Kris05, and I'll see you in my next video or stream.